Hello there. Thank you for joining us on the first edition of Journalist Hangout this week. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Today on the program, Obasanjo writes Buhari again, tasks president to tackle insecurity in Nigeria. Organized labor threatens strike over minimum wage implementation, says they are no longer sure about federal government's commitment. And later on, Algeria defeats Nigeria 2-1 in the 2019 AFCON semi-final setup final battle with Senegal. I will be hanging out with Gani Kayode Balogun, Martins Oloja, and Sam Ibemere. Journalist Hangout starts now. So let us begin. Having served as a wartime general, military head of state, and then former president, the former Nigerian leader, Olusegun Obasanjo, is attracting another nickname. He's fast becoming Nigeria's letter writer general. Obasanjo has written another letter to President Muhammadu Buhari on the state of affairs in Nigeria, just 6 months after he wrote a similar one. This time, his 3-page letter centered on insecurity in the country. Obasanjo says Nigeria is on the tipping point, warning that the country is fast sliding to full-blown chaos if nothing is done. And quickly, too. The former president has advised the incumbent president to institute a broad-based national dialogue. As I start off, let me welcome my guests, Gani Kayode Balogun to my immediate left, and then we have Martins Oloja in the lovely cream suit and brown tie, and of course, in lovely native as well, without exempting GKB, who's also looking good.
Thank you. Nice
Sam
to be here.
Ibemere, and I'm the
pleasure.
blessed woman among men. So welcome, gentlemen. Undoubtedly, the former president captures the essence of the heartbeat of the nation currently as we speak. So his letter has given a plate full of food for thought, hasn't it? GKB, let's start with you.
Yes, Obasanjo has the knack, let me use that word, for tapping into our collective pain at various times of national discourse, basically to aggregate what people have been saying on different levels and at different fora. This letter, of course, is no different. He did it to Shagari, he did it to Buhari in the first tenure, he did it to his successors, as it were. So again, he has done what he assumed is his role as an elder statesman. And for those who tend to overlook it, saying that the man is a busybody who should mind his own business, I always say that there's a saying in Yoruba that says that an elder cannot be in the market and the head of a newly born skewered to the side. If those who are other elders feel the same way about Nigeria, they too should write their own letters. And that's my take on the issue.
Martins, before you take up on GKB's point, let me read from OBJ's missive. As a Nigerian who still bears the scar of the Nigerian civil war on my body, and with a son who bears the scar of fighting Boko Haram on his body, you can understand, I hope, why I'm so concerned. When people are desperate and feel that they cannot have confidence in the ability of government to provide security of lives and property, they will recourse to anything and everything that can guarantee their security individually and collectively. It's the last bit of that paragraph that is disconcerting, and especially with news coming in, just today that another 49-year-old farmer had been killed in Ogun State, just an hour's drive from here. When people begin to get that sense that former president talks about, that they are insecure and government cannot guarantee protection for them, is it degenerating, or is OBJ going senile, as some people would want to say?
Yes, some people will want to say that, but this is not a time to blame the messenger. I think we should concentrate on the message because, as my brother said, he has a way and he has the weight to talk about this thing, the state of the nation, and to speak truth to power. So many of us may have been writing like this. We may have been talking at various pepper soup joints. We may have addressed all these things in our different columns. But it's not the same thing as a former head of state. As he said, now 12 years of being in office and in power, we cannot ignore what he is saying at this time. We cannot say that he is frivolous. It's not. And we can accuse him of so many things. But when it comes to a pan-Nigerian affair, when it comes to the state of the nation, when it comes to Nigeria as a country, he has pulled down even his own people. You recall that even his own people in the Southwest don't like him. They say that he's always carrying Nigeria on his head. And we always accuse him of that, to the extent that when he was coming for the second time, he didn't win even in Southwest. But that is Obasanjo for you. But that aside, this is not a time to ignore what he is saying about the state of the nation. He said, it is the issue of life and death for all of us and for our dear country, Nigeria. You see, we used to talk here about Southeast, about Northeast. We used to talk about Yobe, Borno, and then Northeast, Adamawa, and some other adjoining states. But now, we are talking about this weekend about Ondo State. Well, you just talk about Ogun State. So in Southwest, the attention is now on Southwest. Away as they just inaugurated the Northeast Development Commission to address the scars and issues in the Northeast. We are now setting the tone for Northwest Development Commission because of what is happening. And I think this is not the way we should be talking at this time when the world is concentrating on development. We are concentrating on security issues. And these are not the things to trivialize. We should not, after this discussion, we should not hear people talking about Obasanjo is a busybody, Obasanjo is this, is a letter writer general of the Federation. We should concentrate on the issues, the discussion points he has raised in his new letter. And I think that's my take.
Sam, is this about politics? How will this be perceived or received from the presidency?
This is beyond politics. This is a matter that affects you and I. The tension in the land is palpable, and the central issue here is insecurity. Everyone is crying. The Northeast, we have the Boko Haram challenge. In the Northwest, we have the banditry going on. In the Middle Belt, we have the farmers' herders clash. The Southwest has just been introduced, as it were, to the issue of banditry. Only this morning, we learned in the South-South that Siasa's mother was kidnapped. I mean, there's tension all over the place. So I think that the presidency ought to appreciate that it does have a huge security challenge on its hands. And there's no pretense about it. And what the former president has asked that we should do is basically create a stakeholder mentality. He's calling for dialogue. It's not different from what has happened in the past. I mean, we had one sometime in 2014. If the outcomes of that conference are not agreeable to the ruling party, they should initiate something fresh. There's absolutely nothing wrong in asking for dialogue, because the federating units and the people that make up this entire nation are beginning to ask questions. People don't feel safe anymore. There are sections of the country where people feel marginalized. We don't want to begin to go into the nitty-gritty of all that. But the concerns are real. So what the former president has done is to speak truth to power. True, everybody wants to, refer to OBJ, as he's fondly called, as someone who likes to ride with the waves. Well, so be it. But there are very salient points that have been raised in his letter to Mr. President. And he gave his reasons. He says, look, the reason I'm doing this is because there are lots of Nigerians who are concerned about key issues that I've talked about. And I think that I need to make these letters open. So nobody should feel aggrieved that the letter wasn't addressed to Mr. President. And who cares? Are the issues raised in that letter germane? Are they very critical to our survival as a nation? And I think that the answers are yes. So the onus is on Mr. President, and the buck stops on his table. He must admit that. He must admit that. He's the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. If everything goes well, all credit to him. If everything goes wrong, he takes the responsibility. He can't shy away from it. Things have gone absolutely wrong. The world is crying. The UK is asking its citizens to be very careful the way they move around the country. The US is doing the same thing. And so why do we want to pretend? Why do we want to bury our heads in the sand and pretend everything is okay? This is a huge challenge on the table of Mr. President and the ruling party. Absolutely, I think that most of what the former president has said are agreeable to me, as far as I'm concerned. Let's sit down and genuinely and honestly talk about challenges that face us as a country. In this case, the security concerns. Let nobody sit back somewhere and think that he has all the answers. That's my take.
Does his letter perhaps in any way justify the concerns he raised in his last letter 6 months ago?
Absolutely. I think it's basically a follow-up. And I remember when that, his earlier letter, was published, there were, cries here and there, why would he be doing this and all that. And I thought that, like our colleague here has said, forget the bearer of the message. Look at the content. Look at the message. These are issues that touch all of us as a people. So if the president and the presidency and the ruling party hadn't done so much, they should go back and do some soul searching. Ask very fundamental questions. That's what Nigerians are asking for. We want to be safe. We want to travel from point A to B without being so scared. The man whose daughter was killed by our passionality described the situation as one where this country is at war. So we can't be talking about politics here. It's not politics. The dangers are real.
Now, OBJ raises some very critical point which you touched on earlier. I wonder if I can immediately find it. He talks about the Fulani and perhaps if there is anything germane in the agitation that should be addressed. GKB, I want you to address that now.
What the former president
what is there? Is this an agitation? Is it an issue of self-determination? What is it that is critical about the Fulani that the administration should look at?
One will have agreed with the former president, if not the fact that those who are doing cattle rustling, are doing banditry in Zamfara, are also Fulani. And then you ask them, they also claim fellow Fulanis over Fulani land. So what exactly do you want to talk to them about in the current estimation that we have? Two reasons for this. One is the fact that there's a saying in the US, if somebody comes in and calls you an horse, slap him. If the next person comes in and calls you a horse, kick him in the behind. If the third person comes in and calls you a horse, you should buy an harness, because obviously you are yours. If somebody said the Fulanis are the trouble in the Northwest, the Fulanis is the trouble in the Middle Belt, and now the Fulanis are the trouble in the Southwest, definitely something is wrong with the narrative. And nobody seems to be facing that reality of condemning the act that led to the profiling of a particular group that refused to obey the simple laws of our country. Because if the law says I cannot move around with knives, and somebody is allowed to move around with guns, something is wrong with that narrative. If people say I should drop my guns that I register, and somebody is allowed to move around with guns, then something is wrong with the narrative. You have to look at the narrative before you look at the consequence. Sitting down to talk about Fulanis right now will be an acceptance that they forced us into a corner and we have to do what they want. That cannot be the solution in the short term. In the long term, I agree. But in the short term, we must bring the criminal elements within all ethnic groups to the love of justice. Yeah. Then we can now move to solve the problem in the long term. By agreeing in the short term, you can simply telling other people that this is what you have to do to get the attention of government to listen to you.
Interesting. Long-term solution, short-term. Martins, the former president says, the unfortunate situation is that the criminality is being perceived as a Fulani menace, unleashed by Fulani elite in the different parts of the country for a number of reasons. But even more unfortunately, many Nigerians and non-Nigerians who are friends of Nigeria attach vicarious responsibility to you, that's the president now, as a Fulani elite and the current captain of the Nigerian ship. Is it wrong for the former president to call out President Buhari in this manner? Is it turning into a needless, ethnic, divisive commentary?
You know, that was why in my column yesterday, I quoted Lady Macbeth, who says, all the perfumes of Arabia cannot sweeten this little hand. because of perception of what her husband and herself perceived to have done in the killing of King Duncan. So in the circumstances, what can we say? The president, is Fulani. And people have been saying, Obasanjo didn't say any new thing. People have been saying, Mr. President, take care of this thing. Now, all the Fulani people have been implicated because a Fulani man is in office. And that is one of the reasons people have been saying, Mr. President, be inclusive even in your own appointments. Because at such a time like this now, the narrative can come to the extent that, oh, why is it that all these Fulani men and people who are close to Fulani men are in charge of security, they are in charge of paramilitary, they are in charge of this, they are in charge of that, that you have not been inclusive. And that is why he was saying that, why are you asking all people who have been licensed to drop their guns? And then these people are using the guns, and they have not mopped up this. The accusation will come at such a time like this. So what Obasanjo is saying is not about hatred for the office of the president. He's talking about perception, which I wrote about recently. Perception management is very difficult. It's fast becoming reality. Like we will say locally here that if a witch will cry last night and then the child dies today, that witch will be suspected.
Suspect.
So this is the issue, and it's a responsibility as he is now forming a government to look at the content of this letter, to look at accusation and perception around, and form a government that is inclusive and issues. He talked about 2014 and El-Rufai committee's report and all those things. It shouldn't be rumor again that the Chief Segun Osoba will be saying, Mr. President has approved. Decentralization of police force is now a desideratum. It's now necessary. Now that the national police cannot solve all these problems all over the country. Somebody, Inspector General of Police in Abuja, giving orders to 36 states and 774 local government. It's no longer permissible. It's no longer possible. These are issues of federalism, issues of restructuring of the federation structure.
Issues indeed that cannot be ignored. We
have cannot be ignored at this time anymore.
Aluko from Ogun State. From Songo, yeah, Ogun State. Good evening,
hello, good
Aluko.
evening.
You're on.
Good
Go
evening,
ahead
Journalist
with your contribution and make it brief.
Hello, good evening, Journalist Hangouts.
Go ahead, Aluko, you're on.
Yes. Yes, it's a good thing the ex-president Olusegun Obasanjo is expressing the fear that most Nigerians have been expressing for a very long time. But the question we Nigerians will need to ask ourselves is this. Thank God the GKB is sitting down there. Their leader, Gani Adams, who is the OP's leader, was arrested during Obasanjo's time. Obasanjo was part of this insecurity problem in this country. We need to say the truth this time around. In as much as the judiciary are the problem in this country, the journalists attempt to be not saying truthful to the authorities. The PDP in their bid to rule Nigeria for 60 years when they were gallivanting all over the country, Nigeria for 60 years, they perpetrated several acts. The killing of Bola, it was done in Obasanjo's era. What did he do about that? There are so many other things. There are Marshall and Co. What did he do about that? You see, the fact of the matter is, yes, there is insecurity in this country, but we should think outside the box now, because I believe the insecurity problem we have now is beyond this banditry and this Fulani X-Men thing. Some of our people are likely involved.
All right, thank you very much, Aluko. Sam, he says OBJ is part of the problem.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, all the administrations, way back to the days of independence, you can't possibly say that each and every one of them has scored 100% in terms of the way it has, managed their resources, managed every other thing that would have helped us as a nation, to grow. OBJ has his issues. I mean, we've talked about that here. When I made my initial point, I said he's someone who likes to ride with the wave. But we're also concerned that it is important that we take a very critical look at the issues that he has raised at the moment. I mean, the PDP had their issues, no doubt about it. But are we going to dwell in the past? Yes, we need a bit of our history to understand and appreciate where we are and how we can deal with the future. But we must move on. I have a concern here, and that concern has to do with the issue of stigmatization. You know, I have my worries. There are criminals all over the place. There are all over the country. So we should be worried as a people that a certain group is being tagged as, you know, very violent, you know, prone to terrorist attack and all that. I think it's very unfortunate, and I think as a people, as a nation, we have to be very careful, you know, not to stigmatize, you know, our fellow citizens. What we need to do is to carefully, and that's the challenge before Mr. President and the ruling party, carefully sort out the issue of criminality and deal with it. Do you understand? Mr. President, and I want to say this without, you know, without missing words, has not, and that's where the issue of perception also comes in, has not appeared to have handled this matter in an even manner. I'll give you a clear example. 2 or 3 weeks ago, or less than that, a certain coalition fundamental group came out, gave all manner of ultimatum. If you don't do this, we'll do this.
Don't do Ruga.
And we were expecting that the presidency will react in a way as to send very strong signals. We didn't get that. So it's up to you and I. And so when somebody wakes up and says, look, the Johannesburg guys, I said, look, you guys get up and defend yourself. They're coming from somewhere.
Which is what OBJ is talking about.
Absolutely. That if you don't handle this, we could face the possibility of the kind of program that happened in 1966. And we don't want to go back there.
Yes.
We don't want to go back there.
It will be worse.
Yeah, Martins was talking about, you know, how from this platform we were beginning to perhaps inadvertently talk about a Northwest Development Commission, as a Northeast Development Commission is already in the works. But we have an NDDC, which is unable to account for millions of dollars over a 10-year period. Will a Northeast Development Commission or a Northwest or similar organization be the answer, the solution to this problem? GKB.
We tend to throw money at problems. The money is self-created. And that's why we are in this mess that we are. The moment the Kanu joined the Northeast, I know this is just a job for the boys. It's just an avenue to siphon money out of the federal purse to a particular part of the country, basically as a payback, as it were. And the moment it works, other parts of the country will also do the same thing.
The South is asking for their own.
They will ask for. I'm asking for.
Southwest.
No, Southwest is too big. I'm asking for an Ibadan Development
Commission. Just for Ibadan alone.
Because everybody's passing through Ibadan anyway. And they have to pay us. So jokes apart, I think we need to be serious in this country. Every time we raise intervention agencies, they become permanent. They're meant to be short-term solutions to problems that the Constitution and the structure should take care of. In Nigeria, they will not go away. NDDC is supposed to be an intervention for 10 years. It's been around for 30 years. The one they are setting up now is supposed to be short-term, like the one they did in Germany. I can guarantee you, those who are still alive for 50 years, it will still be there. It's the way we are. We look at every problem as an opportunity to make money. And that's why we never solve this problem.
The unique Nigerian
Obasanjo
mentality.
said it, and he was right. This thing will go away if there is will on part of government. It will go away under 48 hours. But there are some people in government who are making money from fighting Boko Haram, making money from fighting banditry. But making money now, some people even make money now that didn't come into the Southwest.
Oh, all right, just hold it there. We have another caller on the line, Rahim from Osun State. Good evening, Rahim.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening.
You're on, Rahim. Go ahead with your contribution.
See, I just want to contribute one thing. See, this insecurity is all over the world. Don't let all these international, these American, Britain, even they are killing people more in America than in Nigeria. I'm telling you, it's bad. The problem is we must go closer to God. We are very far. See, to reduce this thing, please, let's go closer to God. Let God touch those who are doing this thing.
Thank you, Rahim. Rahim says we must become closer to God?
I think
I would think we're the most religious nation.
Yeah, we're most religious, but we are not the most godly. The issue is not, this is the way we are. When there is a problem like that, you say, let's leave everything to God. What God has even empowered us to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, we now outsource it to God. We say, God, it's your own. We are on our own, instead of doing what we are supposed to do. And which leads me to what we have been discussing. Even Obasanjo envisaged this thing, as it is coming, blame game. He said, blame game among own forces must be avoided. Blame game everywhere. He said that the president must be seen to be addressing this issue with utmost seriousness and with maximum dispatch and getting all hands on deck to help. Getting all hands, not hands from God. Yes, we can call on God, but you know that people are even misquoting and they are saying, attributing something to the Bible, which is not in the Bible, that the heaven helps those who help themselves. It's not in the Bible. But people all just assume that it is in the Bible. It's just that if you do not help yourself, you leave what God has empowered you, has asked us to go and dominate, has empowered us, given us wisdom, given us knowledge to solve problems, creating universities to solve problems. Universities are to solve problems, knowledge to solve problems, but we are now saying God should do it. That is not the way we should do. What we can do is what we are talking about, specific things, not general things, specific things that the leadership of this country should address at this time. Look at the unfortunate scenario it's painting. A Fulani herdsman. If we look deep into it, we will see that most of these atrocities are not by Fulani herdsmen. Our own people are getting involved, but because it has not been solved and no thorough investigation has been done, they are not, even when they say they capture some people, we do not hear anything about prosecution. We do not hear even all this Aneni and all those things. But when they captured them, people will go to court to even hear. It was from investigation we got to know that Lawrence Aneni was not alone. Even some police officers were involved. We are not doing thorough investigation, prosecution. It's through prosecution that we get to know that the demonization that we are talking about, the stereotypes that is destroying the nation now, we will not get the facts of this matter. This is the era of data journalism. This is the era.
Indeed, it is a Hydra-headed issue, and of course, the key
that's
point
why,
that
that is why what he's saying is germane, because if Buhari gives all the security apparatus to a particular part of the country, and the people who are being demonized are from that part of the country, why not use the people to solve the problem?
It will be fodder for this commentary to continue to thrive if it goes that way. We must go for a break now. Still to come, organized labor threatens strike over minimum wage implementation. Says they are no longer sure of federal government's commitment. After the break, we'll piece this together. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us on Journalist Hangouts, the first edition for the week. And just before the break, we looked extensively at the insecurity issue, particularly at the latest letter written by former President Olusegun Obasanjo to President Muhammadu Buhari on the state of insecurity in the land. We're moving on now. Any negotiation, according to Indonesian author Toba Beta, has a limit. Otherwise, war is irrelevant. The 30,000 naira minimum wage imbroglio in Nigeria is an indication that organized labor and government are working at cross purposes. So a showdown may be inevitable for its implementation. The president of the Trade Union Congress, TUC, Quadri Olaleye, has threatened that organized labor may be forced to embark on an industrial action over the delay in the payment of the new minimum wage to workers. Olaleye says workers are no longer sure of federal government's commitment to pay the figure, even when organized labor has lowered its demands in the consequential adjustment negotiation. He believes the enthusiasm that greeted the signing into law of the new minimum wage is fast turning into a nightmare. Gentlemen, let's first look at the negotiation. According to Labour, as it said, they were willing to lower from 60 to 66%. I'm not sure of what the initial figure is. But they're saying now that negotiators are coming too far down from 66% to 9.5% for workers on level 14 and 5% for workers on level 17. Isn't the margin too wide, GKB?
Well, we said it on this program just before the election. The agreement that he reached was basically to give political cover to the politicians so that the elections can go over. Then they come back to where they are. We all know that the current country that we have right now, it will be extremely difficult for certain state governments, even some parastatals of government, to pay the money being asked for. And we said it on this program that hell will freeze over before certain governors will pay the money that they were asking for. Once they've not been able to take their case before the elections and go for broke, they've lost the initiative. And I know the politicians that we have will drag this thing as long as they could. And then they will have to come back to the figure that they can pay. Governors have told us in the past they cannot pay. Federal governments have tried to adjust to the reality. And you are 5% for a permanent secretary. And then 43% for lower cadre. It's basically, on paper, looks fantastic. But how many people are level 17? The bulk of the civil servants are on level 8 to 13. And that's why you are taking away 43%. So instead of, in most countries, they will push the bulk of the money up to the level 17 and above and take about 50%. So they bring it down to a level that they can manage. But they too, like I said, they've lost the plots when they agreed before the election to accept what the government is offering without a signature on paper.
So, Martins, do you blame Labour for short-sightedness, according to GKB?
No, it's not for short-sightedness. The way they were negotiating, the way everybody was appealing to them, the way people asked them to calm down, and all those things that just for the purpose of a peaceful election. And it's not, they didn't start this thing yesterday. It's been difficult negotiation in Nigeria.
The last 6 years.
The last 6 years. People have been negotiating. Even ASU people, if they come up with their own, health workers, all sorts of association, teachers, always on strike negotiating. And the one that after agreeing, after some time, will be talking about this thing. But now it is just like Proverbs 13:12 about hope deferred that makes the heart
fond.
So to be sick. And longing fulfilled is a tree of life. So now their hope has been deferred. They are now saying that, they are saying that government is coming up with their usual magic ambush, all aimed at scuttling the whole exercise. That is what is making them to be agitated at this time, that government is doing something to ambush them. Government is doing something to make this thing impossible again. They don't want to pay in time. But we discussed something here the other day, that the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, an emir of Kano now, drew the attention of the nation to the fact that about 70% of the budget of the Federation is used for debt servicing and fuel subsidy. You cannot say that one too is a frivolous person who does not know what he's saying. Regardless of what he was governor of Central Bank of Nigeria, and he's an economist. He's not a political office holder. He knows what he's talking about. That with 70%, what do we have now to fulfill this promise? The answer to that question will be blowing in the wind.
Interesting.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. I think central to this discourse is the matter of integrity. I mean, if you make a promise, if you reach agreements, and you refuse to keep to those agreements or the promises that you have made, you're simply telling other stakeholders that they shouldn't trust you. And I think that the government is making the mistake of looking at the issue of trust or integrity from a very narrow perspective. It should be concerned about the larger implications of not making yourself believable. You will think that this is just about salaries, but it's about how the people perceive the authorities in the area of governance. And I think that's the mistake that the federal government is making. I mean, the issue of salaries dates back almost 8 years. I mean, by the law, every 5 years, salaries ought to be negotiated. So this matter ought to have been put to rest sometime in 2016. We're 2019, almost 3 years in arrears. Sorry, my concern.
I take your point about integrity, but the handwriting was on the wall when we had the tripartite committee, technical committee. Only recently we had the salary review committee. So, and Labour is used to government style of ambushment, from past negotiations. But did it help matters itself by not having a harmonized position at the time of negotiation?
No negotiation is straightforward. There have always been dissenting voices. If I understood you very well, I mean, you had the Labour that was also divided within itself.
Absolutely.
You had two factions. One was asking for X naira, the other one was asking for something different and all that. It took a while. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, agreements were reached. Promises were made. The president even signed the act into law sometime in April, either April or 18th.
18th
So once you have given your accent, you've committed yourself as a government, and that's the point we're making. So we ought to move from April 18. Why has the government, like you said, people are basically buying time. Those in authority are basically buying time. But I don't also want to...
You agree that government has gone back on its word, not once, not twice in the past.
Yes. And that is why I'm concerned about the larger implications of not doing things right, of not making yourself believable. When people argue that we don't have enough to go around, especially in terms of salaries, I disagree. Maybe not very sharply. And I'll give you examples. In Bauchi, we're told a certain governor spent over 2 billion on burials. Stories were out there. He didn't quarrel with it. In fact, he said, no, I didn't spend 2. I spent 1.2 billion. Now, when we try and understand the kind of waste that goes on around the country.
Across the board.
Across the board. So yes, we have our challenges. The fundamentals are there. We don't have so much money and all that stuff. But are we willing to make sacrifices? Our leaders don't seem to be ready to make sacrifices. You can imagine how much 1.2 billion naira.
How far it will go.
Yeah, in sorting out issue of salaries. And somebody just, under the cover of burials, siphoned money. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not labeling any person, but the story is out there. So government has to do what is right. A worker deserves his wage.
So the new minimum wage is an act of parliament. Does Labour have the opportunity of, resorting to the judiciary to seek redress? GKB?
Yeah, they do, but they have a name for it.
Limitations.
No, they have the one they do about labor, industrial courts.
Yes.
That's where they can go.
National Industrial Court.
And they have a court. There's a lower one, there's an higher one. But you and I know that will take time and months.
I think the only thing that will resolve this is gra-gra. Government wants...
That's the thing.
It's only gra-gra that can get
what has
government to concede.
achieved in the past?
Well,
Yeah, you shut down the system.
That is the only language that governments of Nigeria seem to understand. Gra-gra. Just industrial. Once they hear that, okay, they call for negotiation. Once they relax, they forget about it. Once they just say, look, let us do some warning strike, it is then the Labor Ministry and officials that say...
You've already served 2 week notice.
Yes, they serve
between now and the next week, you'll be sure that...
Everybody is tired that there is no... Elsewhere, this is a small world now. Elsewhere, you see, they can even draw attention for a few hours and continue to work. Yeah. But here, academic activities will be disrupted for more than a year. Allow tech, how many years? 2 years.
4 years.
They close down a university where it's unheard of. And it is...
Like Sam said, you forget that government signed an agreement with us.
With us.
Signed.
And then
they released 2 days later. Not even 1 month, 2 days.
Since 2009, they have been negotiating. They have not reached any agreement. You see the same ASU now, you hear rumbles all the time because government He talked about integrity. It's a very serious issue.
They have money
The
to give
one-
to,
the
they
one
have money
that
to give
is
to footballers. They don't have
grumbling
money
and
to give to
grumbling.
lecturers.
Yes. But you see, he was talking about some issues that governors, let's leave Abuja alone, 36 state governors, what they should do. We are beginning to hear now, they have SA Media, SA Communication, Chief Press
SSA.
Secretary, SSA to SSA, and all these things. They don't even care
you know,
about the state of the economy.
We talked about how
We
much
must
a
wrap
certain
up
governor-
this segment now. Yeah, the one that is rumbling and grumbling now is Sano.
Managing waste.
Is Sano demanding 30 billion naira. The drama is unfolding. How it will turn out between government and Labour, of course, we'll get to know in the coming weeks. We'll go for another break now. When we return, it will be time to look at Nigeria's performance last night. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. It's been a jolly ride, albeit bittersweet, with the color of issues we've been looking at. And this is no different. When it comes to football, Nigerians are like the esophagus. They always want glory for the country's national team, the Super Eagles, at every tournament. Having reached the semi-final stage of the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations in Egypt, where few people gave them little chance to excel, many soccer fans had their eyes fixed on the final. But Algeria put paid to that with a 2-1 defeat in Cairo on Sunday. There is still something to fight for, though. Nigeria will battle another North African side, Tunisia, for the bronze medal on Wednesday, while Algeria and Senegal will fight for the ultimate prize in the final. Meanwhile, Super Eagles coach Janot Raw has admitted that his team lost to a better side. But that's not where we're going to start from. First of all, Promise Afoge, welcome to the program.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you.
Promise joins us now. So let me start with Promise. What do you think about Nigeria's performance last night?
Well, let me start with Gennard Ross saying Nigeria lost to a better side.
Okay.
He doesn't need to tell me. I
All
mean,
right.
it was apparent, it was glaring, it was visible to the blind and audible to the deaf.
Even Stevie Wonder is aware.
That
But
the-
Promise, some say the Eagles did well,
well, that's
that they fought for it.
I'm finding that word now. I mean, it
Consolatory.
all depends on how you look at the game. Yeah, they fought for it as an underdog in 90 minutes. This is an Algerian team we walked over and route the World Cup in 2017. We beat them in Uyo 3 when I was in the stadium. We drew 1-1 in Algiers. That was because we had already qualified. We could have beaten Algeria in Algiers, you know. But it just tells you
Tell
the
him, we've
Algerian
done it
team
before.
over the last 2 years have improved, while the Nigerian team have plummeted. You know, this is an Algerian team we could have beaten with ease. You look at the statistics, it's in our favor. In terms of the rating, Nigeria is number 3 in Africa behind Senegal and Tunisia. Algeria is down the
bottom.
pecking order. And so on paper, you want to think the Eagles should have won that game. But from the start of the Nations Cup, you know, we saw clearly that the Super Eagles had struggled, even through the group stage. We struggled to churn out the 1-0 result against Burundi, against Guinea. A lot of people were celebrating. But for those who will be objective and pragmatic, we knew the Eagles had a problem. We could not beat Madagascar. We could not beat Madagascar. We came back into the knockout stage, edged out Cameroon, who perhaps would rue that loss to themselves. We beat South Africa, who looked very toothless because they looked at the fact that against Super Eagles, they've never had a chance. And I think they gave the Eagles too much respect. Against Algeria, I saw it coming. Some persons would say each time we wear the green, that all green jersey,
I heard that too.
we always lose. That is sentiment. I mean, I don't believe in all those stuff. I mean, if you play well, even if you wear rags, you will win. So it's about who wants it the most. Yes, the Eagles gave it all, they're all, like some persons would say, but I thought we really had a chance to really nick it. Sometimes, I was telling someone a couple of minutes ago, the better teams sometimes lose games. It all depends on how strategic you are. In 90 minutes, the Algerians were the better team, true. But our coach, Gennard Rohr, failed to manage that game. It was same issues.
You're taking it to another angle, which I want GKB to take. What do you think about Gennard Rohr's tactics for yesterday's match?
Not the match itself, but the competition. Because, like he said,
Holistically now.
we've been riding our luck since the beginning of the competition. We've been winning with the skin of our teeth, matches that we ought to have won handily. There are certain things we call in football when you are in a situation where you are just going through the motions. Americans will call it phoning it in. That means you are not really putting in your best, but just assume that you have enough clout to make it to the next level. That will end at this level. Competence will take you so far. It's ability to make the difference that will take you to the final. We will have gotten it yesterday, like I told people, if we had just managed after the penalty not to start attacking, because it was 3 minutes to go, they gave us another 3 minutes, and I was wondering, we've been at the underdog for 90 minutes. We got a penalty, we've equalized. Why not slow the game down? I'm not a coach. I don't know anything about coaching. But common sense dictates that you have the physical ability to subdue them in the next 30 minutes. Why try to win it in nights? It was that kind of thing that led to what happened. And that's the problem with Roa. Throughout this been here. It will take a team that is full of promise, and at the time they want to pull the trigger, they will fail.
And then it was said, Martins, to you now, that he was out of his depth and lacking in wisdom when he asked Chukwueze to leave.
Yeah, definitely. You know, there are so many coaches for such a thing like that. But, you know, just as he said, we just saw some result. But, you know, result in a coach, result for that kind of thing is a result of what has gone into planning, into training, into the quality of even the recruitment of the coach himself. So we don't want to blame anybody now, but it is over. But it's not a world-class coach. That is not the kind of coach I think Nigeria deserves. We may be quiet about it and all those things like that, to the extent that those of us who are mere analysts will be talking about this. You know, he coached Niger, he coached which other country? What did he win before? Yes, what did he win before we got him? And all those things. That's why we are talking about this mismanagement, all those things. And if you look at Kanu, you look at even Yobo analyzing, you look at JJ Okocha, why are these people not part of the technical team and management of Nigerian football? We are talking about other parts of the world. Before the world, during a few hours to the beginning of World Cup, what happened? Spain sacked its coach.
And Fernando Hierro was
brought in from their own
absolutely.
You know, but our own the real footballers are not part of it.
But the truth is, not every former footballer can be a coach.
Not necessarily a coach. We are talking about technical person, the director of sports. This from ministry, from the minister to most of the people parading themselves as delegates and all those things like that. What have they got to do with such those things? How did they? Well, even the NFF person. Let's speak truth to power, because we've lost now. What is competition for third position? We're not even sure of. We are talking about the foundation of our failure. We celebrate mediocrity. Look at
But Martins, would your commentary be different had Nigeria won that match yesterday?
Definitely, we have that.
Would you have been?
You yourself, you were afraid.
Would you have been lauding Raw's performance?
No, definitely.
Or Raw's effort, rather?
In our office, even today, when we did some editorial meeting, I discussed so many of these things before even we lost, that the way we celebrate mediocrity and be calculating how we will do this, we were never sure. Look at our people yesterday.
Sometimes you may win a tournament,
you know?
But how you win a tournament also matters.
It
comes
matters.
into question. We won the Nations Cup in 2013, don't forget. And you know, the road to the final was tough under Stephen Keshi.
Yes.
It was tough. We won the Nations Cup, but Nigerians were not still convinced Stephen Keshi was the best coach for us at that time.
And Nigeria was never rated number one.
You know, so at this tournament, even if we had gotten to the final, would have been disgraced by Senegal. But let's leave that aside. Let's assume we even won.
Let's
even assume we won the tournament. Some persons like myself wouldn't have been convinced Gernot Rohr is the right man for the job. Some persons will say, well, he discovered Zidane at Bordeaux. He's coached Bordeaux at the French League. He's coached Guinea. He's coached Niger. But what are the major achievements of this man? He's proven to us over the last 3 years he's been at the helm that he lacks proper game management. I was at the World Cup Russia last year. The game against Argentina, we had no business losing that game at all if the coach had managed the game properly. Same thing played out yesterday. Just 4 minutes of injury time.
4 minutes.
And we couldn't hold it. At that
4
point,
minutes.
I thought he could have changed his formation. He started with a 4-3-3. He could have gone to a 3-5-2. That way you were able to soak,
choke the midfield.
Choke the midfield.
Because we lost in the midfield.
At that time, we needed a John Mikel Obi in that game to slow down the tempo, to hold on to the ball, to cause the
Nigerians to commit
fouls. But he didn't do that. Rather, he pulled out the only live wire we had going forward,
Chukwueze.
and allowed the pressure to come on us. You know, Musa was he was captain, yeah.
Yes.
He had no business staying 90 minutes in that game.
Yeah.
Trust me.
He's
The
a
coach,
speedster.
the Algerian coach had said that.
Go.
Well, that's the decision for the
Definitely
NFF
for
to
me,
make.
it's not our decision, but we as citizens who have our own opinion, I think Nigeria deserves much more than raw.
And that takes me to my next point.
Okay.
The two coaches in the final are local coaches. Aliou Cisse for Senegal and Belmadi for Algeria.
Yeah.
They are local coaches.
Yes.
We pay raw $48,000 monthly. No Nigerian coach has ever earned that. The highest paid Nigerian coach was Stephen Keshi, $5 million. But we're even told that's before tax. So.
Well, you and I know.
Which one is Jao Jao?
You and I know that the NFF will never pay local coaches because they cannot get the nominal thing that they get to come back to the system. And I remember that for about
Is that the Jao Jao?
remember Shuaibu, Keshi, Siasia, that young fellow, Olise.
Sunday Olise.
What the NFF will do is to frustrate them at a level because they know the system.
And they did.
And the first thing they will do is that you can't do this. That's why the question you asked about bringing in former internationals can never work because they know the system.
Why won't it work?
And the cabal that runs our football will not allow it to work. You and I know that.
Should we continue to discuss? Nobody should invest in cabal. We invest in people to run the affairs of this country, beginning from even appointment of a sports
to do like
minister.
he would tell
the
you.
last sports
Because
minister we
the
had with
government
due
can no
respect,
longer-
what business did he have?
Government can no longer dissolve
being sports
NFA,
minister?
Abi?
What business?
You know what, gentlemen, I wish Babajide was here because Babajide would balance the argument and say that you could have tactics, but what if the team does not interpret the tactics of the coach? Janot Roy is not here, but is it not a possibility?
That he's talking
The
about.
coach selects his players.
Yes,
The
management.
coach selects his players. To the Nations Cup, before the tournament started, I had always said that this team lacked creativity in the middle of the pack.
Yes.
There's no team that can survive without a creative player who can distribute play. Mikel is not a creative player.
Yeah.
He stopped being when he joined Chelsea. So you can't expect a Mikel to give you a 10. Iwobi is still a learner.
All right.
You can't make
Thank
Iwobi
you
your
so much, gentlemen. We must
It's
end
very,
it
very
here.
unfortunate.
Interesting. As some would say, the problem of Nigeria is a problem of triumph of politics over purpose. We hope that we'll move from that point to where our purpose would define everything that we do. Perhaps from there, the narrative of the country would change. That's our offering on Journalist Hangout today. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of the program. Our feedback channel is Journalist Hangout at tvcnews.tv. Thank you for watching. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Bye for now and God bless Nigeria.